I'm Erin Napier, and I just wrote a children's book called The Lantern House.
And I'm Adam Trest, and I illustrated The Lantern House.
We have been friends for a long time, and we've collaborated on a million different projects. We even did a children's book together before, a million years ago. That was not quite this sophisticated. And I did not want to write the book unless I knew that Adam was able to illustrate it, because you have this story in your mind, and you see it coming to life in a certain way, and no other way would be that identity that I saw in my mind. So I'm very thankful that you took this on. Thank you.
I was excited to illustrate it. I knew from the get-go, as soon as Erin said she had a great story, I was like, it's gonna be beautiful. And I knew that she would have the great words to turn into great pictures.
Thank you, buddy. I think of a house as a personality.
You give it an identity.
I give it an identity. Professionally, that's literally my job. And so the houses that I have lived in my lifetime, I have extreme attachments to. My childhood home where I grew up, if my parents ever sell it, it will crush me. Our first house that Ben and I renovated together, it will always be home to me. And I imagine that house also having feelings about its inhabitants. And that's where the story came from, thinking about what stories our homes could tell about the stories they've seen and the lives lived there. They see tragedy, but they see great celebrations and huge milestones, and they comfort us. You know, we have a lot of tornadoes in Mississippi, and you have time to think about how a house is very comforting in scary weather. And houses take care of us in that way, in the same way that the people in our family take care of us. And you know, they look a certain way because we've put our wants and longings into these rooms, so then houses become like members of our family. And so that's what the Lantern House is. It's sort of an amalgamation of all the houses I've ever lived in, and especially our house in downtown Laurel that Ben and I renovated together. I've loved it since I was a child, and I heard stories from the previous homeowners about weddings that happened at the hearth. And when we were expecting Helen, we painted her nursery green. And so when Helen reads it, she says, "That's my room." But of course, in the book, it happens sometime in the 1950s.
Yeah.
When does our house begin, Adam? What year? I didn't want to date it. I didn't give it any kind of time stamp. How do you
has
feel?
the feeling of like a good 40s, 50s, you know.
Fair.
That was where we sort of started, was thinking about our grandparents buying their first house. That was sort of the timeline of generations, I felt like, that we could start with.
Yeah, we're familiar with that generation.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel too distant from
Well, our
us.
neighborhoods feel like that here
in Laurel.
yeah.
Laurel was really thriving in the early 1900s. The 1940s, Laurel was pretty established by then.
Yeah.
So this is not necessarily any house in Laurel. It's just a 4-square American house. And we thought something that felt like apple pie Americana.
American dream.
Yeah. And we really just discussed for a long time, what architectural style will the Lantern House be?
And it was crazy, like
Neither of us have ever lived in a house like this.
No, yeah. I've lived next door to houses that look like this.
Yeah.
But, and it was even like, I was in Pennsylvania. I was not even in the South.
When you saw the
you pictures,
inspiration.
and I was like, that would be a cool Lantern House. Like,
Do you
just
have the
constantly-
picture of it?
They're on my phone. I just would text and send photos
I wish we
of
could
all
find
these great houses.
The real Lantern
And then-
House is somewhere in Pennsylvania.
You know, like always on Pinterest, I'm getting like vintage house plans will pop up, and it was finding those and seeing.
We both started following like vintage blueprint accounts around that time.
I still get those.
And show them what the Lantern House, your first
Yeah, so the first go around before we had really decided on style was very drafted. Like, it was very dollhouse, cut in half so you could see inside the rooms.
Well, you went to architecture school.
Yeah, so I have a background in architecture. So I wanted to think about it as you're getting to peek inside the house in these special ways that you normally wouldn't be able to. It was more than just a looking through the window or glancing through the back door. It was, you really got full access into the house. And that was our first bump in the road.
Well, that was just the first conversation about what does it feel like?
Yeah,
and what does it look like for kids?
Establishing that style was, in my mind, I was thinking super detailed. Let's find all the little.
We were ready to make a grown-up book.
Yeah, this was going to be like a grown-up children's book.
And so then I was like, but you've been doing these paintings that are so vibrant, so colorful, that are so about movement and whimsy. And I think going with that style would be so kid-friendly.
And it was like getting the permission to be painterly and have fun and be, embrace that whimsy that we've been working towards in some of my work. It was like getting permission to play at that point. And then it just blossomed.
And we just felt like so many recent children's books lean to this very digital style with the artwork. And that's great. I mean, what a time to be alive. They're beautiful books and they have great heart and meaning. But for us, we think the books we loved when we were kids. And some of those predate our lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, you love The Little Prince was a big inspiration.
Sure, absolutely.
And for me, The Little House, which I think it's not surprising that this book has some inspiration from The Little House. But figuring out what this house was going to be and look like and feel like was the first step, and then that sort of informed all the steps that followed.
Being super intentional about we wanted it to be hand painted and traditional mediums, and with that comes brushstrokes and splatters and drips and imperfection
is what we were after the whole time.
Away from this real drafted feel.
Yeah.
So
it was beautiful and I love it.
Beautiful, but not the right thing.
Children's lit has always been your thing though. Like you always wanted to illustrate a children's book.
Gosh, to tell a story through images. To tell a story that Helen and Poppy, my 4-year-old, can sit there as a 4-year-old and look at the book and tell the story. It may not be the right story.
It's gonna be,
but it's a story.
Something.
It's a story, and then she can tell it to me just based off the images. I mean, what a cool job. I mean, to be able to have a child read you a story that you painted. That's the dream, right? I mean, to be able to look through and pick out, that kid looks like me, or that looks like mom, or this kitchen looks like our kitchen, or we mark our heights on our door frame too. Like
that came from our house. We have the laundry room.
Yeah.
Is it the laundry room?
Ours is in the closet. The closet of the bedroom. Everybody gets their measurements done. And so being able to see those traditions play out in the book, and my kids being able to know that it comes from their life too. I mean, like it's part of our traditions that we poured into this. I think.
There is an immortality in creating a book.
Yeah.
It's going to be in a library.
Yeah.
Long after we are gone, and that is wild.
That's crazy.
What matters to me is remembering the generation before us.
Sure.
And remembering the good work of the people who come before us and how we can take from that to create a new future. And that's what Ben and I do with houses.
I was about to say, it's not a fake thing on the show. Like, it is someone else's house before it's your house.
And they did great things, and then they did some weird things.
My girls know the people that lived in the house before us, and they've heard stories about, the crazy parties that they had, and the fun family traditions that they had of, eating dinner on the porch, and they know the history of the people that lived there before us, and they know that the things that we do are making an impact on the house for the next people that live there.
Yeah.
And I hope that this is sort of a way for other people to start their own traditions.
Yeah, to feel like the things we do in this life and in our homes, they matter.
Right.
And then someday someone else will put their mark on it too. Nothing is permanent. And that's the thing. That's the thing about life. That's what the Lantern House is all about.
It's the Lantern House.
Yeah.